Hey everybody, my name is Evan, this is Corey Country, and today we're going to make the station for our drill press. So the first step in any of my projects is finding enough room to break down a full sheet of plywood. This has gotten very easy over the past few projects, being able to clean everything up. Especially from the beginning of shot of episode 1, that is hilarious to look back on. Another thing that helps is using that Craig track saw jig. It's so much cheaper than an actual track saw. The only downside to it is it can be a little inaccurate at times. So what I do is I make sure I cut all my pieces down a little oversized, and then I cut them down to size on the table saw like you're seeing here. So a bunch of these are very thin shreds coming off, and that's just about like a safety margin. So these are a couple of recycled pieces of plywood that I'm using. These are going to be used to hold the top together, as well as used to mount the top itself to the box. And in about 2 seconds here, you're going to see a complete freeze. There it is. And that's where I realized my mistake. So I goofed, and when I was planning all my cuts on the plywood, I rotated the grain of this board 90 degrees by accident. I cut the wrong dimension, so I just have to cut the top and the bottom to match what the sides are now, rather than cutting down another quarter sheet of plywood that I really don't want to waste the money on. The drawer slides I have for this project are 22 inches. This was supposed to be a 24-inch length, so I had like 2 inches to spare on the inside. So I cut these to 22.5 inches based on my specs, which was correct, but I cut them the wrong way. So I needed 24-inch depth and 22.5-inch height. I wound up cutting it to 22.5-inch height, and right now it's at 22 3/4 depth. Whoops! So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut down the top and the bottom to match. So the top is going to go down to 21 3/4, and the bottom is going to go to 22.5 to match the sides, which originally in the plan works out. The drawer slides, like I said, are 22 inches, but they only measure like 21.5 almost, so I can still squeeze those same drawer slides in and we'll be good. So to no surprise, I'm using pocket holes to join this project together. It's pretty simple. You just clamp everything in place nice and tight so the pocket holes don't pull anything apart. They're not exactly the most stable thing unless you clamp them down. And all aboard the struggle bus as we try to clamp this piece in place. This is so much better than the second one, and I'm not going to make you sit through the second one because it's painful to watch. So the same with putting the other piece on. It was just a mess trying to get it on, but we got there. That's all that counts in the end. Here I'm cutting down the face frame maple. I'm using hard maple for this, and I'm cutting down just a few of the pieces. The other pieces I will use relative measuring for. And what you're seeing me do here is marking where I'm going to use my biscuit joiner, which is going to be the method of joinery I use for the face frame. This is actually the top of the piece, and what I'm doing is I am trying to hide the edges of the plywood by using the maple as my corners, and that'll make more sense once it's actually on the piece. But it was a pretty nifty idea, I think. Came out really well. I was very happy with it. Like I said, it's just something I'm trying with the project. I'm making sure I put a good amount of glue on these. The burn marks aren't such a problem, but I always get a little bit worried about glue on the edges of plywood. I know it's going to hold just fine, but it's just one of those things that always runs in the back of my mind. It's not the worst thing in the world, especially for these pieces. They're actually not going to be supporting any weight or anything like that. There's going to be next to no stress on them. All the stress is going to be on the main piece of the plywood for the top attaching to the stringers that I used for the case itself. So attaching the top is super easy. You just drill a few holes in no particular measurements and screw it in from the bottom, just like you would with a countertop. I made sure to leave a little bit of excess on all of these pieces just so I could flush trim them. It was a lot easier than trying to get a perfect measurement and cut. It made more sense to me that way, and it worked out very cleanly, and it didn't take much extra time at all. So I'm just continuing here with the face frame install. This is where I start using the relative measurement. So as you can see, I held the piece up to where I'm putting it, and then I cut it down, and I'll make very small cuts going back and forth until it fits like that. And once again, I'm going to be using the biscuit joiner for this. So I put my piece in place and I make my marks, and then I can go ahead and use my biscuit joiner. Once the face frame itself is all installed, I go ahead and make some measurements for the drawer. I'm using relative measurement again for this, that way I can make sure everything is nice, snug fit. I used that little piece you saw there, was just a test piece that I used to make sure everything was good before I decided to go through and cut all the fronts and backs. Using the 2 drawer slides like I was, as well as 2 cutoffs of the plywood I'm using, ensures that the rest of the measurement will be accurate when I go to cut my pieces down. And you guessed it, I'm using pocket holes once again to put my drawers together. I've fallen in love with this technique. It's very simple, it's clean, it works. It's shop furniture. I'm using recycled pieces of plywood for this anyway. I'm really not worried about, getting a perfect hand-cut dovetail or anything like that. So I'm using a couple of spacer pieces of 1/4" plywood to get my spacers installed. Once again, it's a spacer for a spacer kind of thing. After that, though, I use a couple of random cutoffs, some junk pieces of plywood to get the height on the middle and the top drawer. I do have to apologize. I installed the drawer slides with the camera pointing at the ground. Not really much to see there. Drawer assembly is super simple with pocket holes, just like we've done countless times at this point. You just make sure you get a nice tight clamp and you make sure everything is nice and square, and then you go ahead and drill in the screws. So I'm using 1/4" plywood for the bottoms. I don't quite trust, I'm not going to have that much weight in these drawers, but I don't quite trust just the brad nails. I obviously could, I know that, but just in my head it makes sense to put a little glue down as well. And again, with the edges of plywood, I usually make sure to cover just about everything. I have in the past just kind of put my glue bead down and just thrown on the bottom of these. It works, I just prefer that this one is a little more secure. Just as a follow-up from the last video, the little cabinet there that I have the air compressor in made such a big difference, it's beyond incredible. So installing the drawers, I actually use 2 different methods. This one I'm sure you've seen plenty of times before. I just put a little bit of a spacer piece down so I can raise the drawer up so it doesn't drag on the bottom, and then I install the first screw, the second screw, and then I completely remove the drawer to get the 3rd screw in. And then for the other drawers, I had to measure, since I only had the face frame as a point, there was no way to really keep them level while installing. So what I did was I measured exactly where the center holes would be for the slides, and I took the drawers out, transferred those measurements onto the drawer, and attached them that way. Here I am actually putting a little bit of an edge profile on the drawer faces. Just something I wanted to try. It's just a very small chamfer on all 4 edges of the drawers, just to spice up the cheap plywood. Installing the drawer faces is super easy. I just put the unit on the back and I throw the drawers back into their respective homes. And then I lay out the drawer faces, and I also lay out the handles just to kind of see where exactly I want them. I decided to use the measurement from the top to be the same on all of them. I think that looks a little bit nicer, and it brings the handle up from the ground a little bit for that bottom drawer since it's a little deeper. So you get to see my process here in a second. I just wanted to include this so you can see how I did all the drawers the same way. What I did was I measured out for where my handles are going to go, and then I just drilled through and put some screws in to hold the drawer face to the drawer itself from the front. These holes are going to be covered up anyway, well, repurposed I should say, so they make a perfect hold or clamp really while I attach the drawer faces from the back. And then you can just remove the screws and then tighten in the screws from the inside, that way you get a nice tight fit. And then this is just a quick pan to show you the 1/2 inch reveal that I had and everything, and you can kind of see how nice that chamfer looks on the drawer faces as well. And then really all that's left to do is just sand it down and give it a good finish. So there was a little bit of glue squeeze out, as well as some not perfect joints on this face frame. I definitely could have done better. I guess I might have just rushed a little bit, but overall it was pretty easy to sand down. It's hard maple, so it takes a little bit longer, but nothing we couldn't handle. And my favorite part, dumping the finish on and watching the color of this cheap plywood come out and just shine. It still amazes me how well this color comes out. I'm gonna use it for the workbench build as well, so definitely stay tuned if you're a fan of this color. Then just a little bit of drying time and a few more coats, and we're done. Alright everybody, that finishes up our drill press station. This came out awesome. I am so happy. I've really kind of been using these shop projects sort of like my own little experiments. So for example, the lathe station, I had all my drawers inset. That way nothing will, fall down and gather on the tops of them, which this one might have that issue, but I also wanted to try having the drawer faces protrude a little bit and sit on top of the face frame rather than being inset. It's a really easy way to test things instead of using crazy expensive materials on a project that you're getting paid to do. I'm not getting paid to do this. This is just a project for the shop. So I'm using these as a little bit of time to experiment as I go. And overall, I'm crazy happy with how this came out. So with all these drawers, I do have plans to put some organizers in them. Right now I have a bin, basically, of just a whole bunch of different bits. And it's a mess, to say the very least. So what I'm probably going to do is I'll probably have something for all of my Forstner bits, my router bits I'll probably include in this as well as all my drill bits and drivers. So this is going to be pretty much a one-stop shop for any bits that I need for any of my spinning tools. Thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate the time you're taking to watch these videos. If you're enjoying what you're seeing and looking for a way to support me, there's a like, a share, and a subscribe button below. Please feel free to hit all 10 of those, and I will see you next time.